folks, and welcome to this week's show. As you can see, we've got Rod and Jeremy back by popular demand. And as you can tell by our backgrounds, all different backgrounds, nice ones actually, we're going to be focusing upon Pink Floyd, one of the most influential groups of the last 100 years, just an incredible band. And before we do any of that, we're gonna sort of have a brief discussion in terms of how we got into them and so on and so forth. But before we pile into any of that, please subscribe to the channel, folks. All right, click the like button, click subscribe. For some of our shows, we've had big numbers and people not subscribing. So, for example, I think it's XTC. We've had over 4,000 watching it, and we haven't got the figures. Please click on the subscribe. There's my begging plea going out there. Remember today's show, it's just our opinions as well. If you happen to be one of those rather charming people who thinks it's nice to just send in some sort of verbal abuse because we mispronounced something or whatever, please just jog on casually and don't bother watching the show. Thank you very much. Okay, keeping it polite as I can be. Or more importantly, if you don't like the fact that we've picked something at number 15 or whatever it might be, and therefore you've had to have the decency to sort of email me to let me know or send a message on thingy, don't bother. Seriously, don't bother. Anyway, enough of my gripes. Right, Rod, how did you get into the Floyd?
Um, yeah, I'm not sure I got into them in the sense that they've just always been there, a bit like the Beatles in the sense that they have always been there. And I suppose being a punk, I was quite not into them for that period, 70s, 80s. I was always aware of them. I was always aware that they were an extremely important band, extremely talented band. But I was more interested in what was going on when I was a teenager, and it wasn't them when I was a teenager. But as I've got older, you just delve into other stuff, and it's like you get artists that you just eventually have to like on some level. Neil Young's one. My brother said to me, my brother's older than me, and he said to me, I remember him saying to me when I was quite young, when I was 15 or 16, I can't remember, and he said, because I didn't particularly get Neil Young, I wasn't into him, and he said at some point in your life you will like Neil Young. I don't know when it'll be, but at some point in your life you'll appreciate and like Neil Young, and I do. So Floyd are a bit like that. Me, I suppose that's how I'd explain it.
No, good, good, good. Like it. Remember as well that the key thing here, famously, John Lydon walked down the street with "I hate Pink Floyd" on his t-shirt. However, he had to have a Pink Floyd t-shirt to write "I hate" on it. And that's the thing people forget. And I think he subsequently come out and said he was a Pink Floyd fan. So
Yeah,
there we go. I know he's a big sort of fan of like Krautrock and Can and all those bands, and you can see
and
it all
I'm a
fits
big fan
in.
of doing things purely for effect.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Jeremy, how about yourself then?
Well, similar to Rod, it was kind of in the air. I mean, I was about 9 years old when Dark Side of the Moon came out, and all of a sudden the poster behind me was on my brother's door, and he had the stickers here and there, and the music just coming out of his room. He's 6 years older than me. He was mostly into jazz and funk, so the fact that he was blasting Pink Floyd made an impact. I really liked it. Money was on the radio. That was the
Yeah.
one song you heard on the radio. I was not really aware of anything else. And then I had this epiphany a few years later when I was maybe 14, 15. I went to visit my sister in Canada, and I woke up before she and her boyfriend, and I went over to look at her records, and I saw "Wish You Were Here." I put that on. I put the headphones on so I didn't wake anybody up. Just lay down on the couch, and I was just motionless for the entire side, just mind blown. One of the greatest records. We'll get to that later, but I absolutely loved it. And even though I was completely into punk and post-punk and new wave, I never stopped liking Pink Floyd. And it wasn't until I started investigating Bowie and he put CM Lee Play on the Pinups album that I was
Yes,
like,
yes.
what the heck? That's Pink Floyd too? So then I went back and started filling in some of the gaps.
Yeah.
And then obviously the wall was huge in high school with Another Brick in the Wall, everybody strutting down the hallways to that song.
Yeah.
But they're just one of those bands. Yeah, they've just always been there. And we may get to this later. Maybe they've been there a little too long.
Yeah, mine's interesting because mine was Another Brick in the Wall was number one in the UK in December 1970. Christmas, if I remember rightly, 1979. I think it was the last number one of the 70s in the UK. I could be wrong, but I'm sure it was Christmas number one. I remember me and my brother bouncing up and down on our beds, jumping up and down, singing "We Don't Need No Education." So it's one of those things that it sticks out. But the other thing as well is that I used to listen to the album Relics almost alternatively between that and Uprising by Bob Marley. Those were the two tapes I would flip, and then there was a blues cassette with Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. So it was like three tapes and flick between them, and Stephen Grappelli was the other one, sorry. And so I'd flick between these tapes constantly, and I'd like listen to Relics all the time. So I've got a big soft spot for Relics. I know it's a compilation of the early stuff, but I love it, you know. So that was my sort of introduction to them. And then later, much later on, actually, I never heard Dark Side of the Moon till I was about 16, 17, you know, quite late, really. Same with Wish You Were Here and so on and so forth. So really late was my mate Neil, who was in the band with I think he had an Animals poster on the wall. So when I first met him, if I remember rightly. So yeah, that was good, 17, about 17 years of age, quite late, really. So there we have it. Now then, can I just say before we do the ranking that their discography, along with the Ramones, is the widest range of grading that I'm going to be given here. It was quite stark, I think is the phrase. So I'm going to put the rankings slide up on the screen here, folks, and you'll be able to see this. So as you can see, you can read this yourself, obviously. 5 stars is a masterpiece, 4.5 is essential. This is for anyone who does the podcast. 4 excellent, 3.5 very good, 3 good, 2.5 fair, 2 weak, 1.5 very poor, 1 awful, 0.5 don't bother. So
Don't bother.
yeah, this is going to be interesting. And what we're going to do, rather than doing all 15 and talking about them for ages, because we'll try and keep this shorter, we're going to literally do 15 to 11 each and give them a quick ranking and maybe have a quick word about each one. If we start, you know, we'll try not to repeat ourselves too much as well. So we're going to start with you, Rod, first of all. So 15 to 11, if you want to give us your lists and your rankings for each album, please.
All right, 15 to 11. So 15, I've got Umagumma, or Umaguma, I think it's Umagumma. I've just put some decent live tracks, which are okay. Didn't mind a couple of those. But it's largely experimental noodling I've put, which didn't really do a great deal for me. I'll probably give it 2 stars, maybe 2.5. Is there a 2.5? 2 stars? Maybe.
Yeah.
Then I've got Atom Heart Mother, 14. Again, it's the title track's kind of interesting because they're one of their earliest long tracks. It's a whole side pretty much, isn't it? But it doesn't really work for me. It's got choirs in it, church bells. There's loads going on, but it it's not engaging for me. Plus it's got a few other tracks on it, and it's got a couple of acoustic tracks that are okay. Yeah, again, probably a little bit better than Umagumma though, so 3 stars.
Wow, good
Or
territory.
2.5 stars. Did I start low?
2.5.
Is there a 2.5?
There's a 2.5. So 2.5
2.5 then.
is
Okay,
fair.
it's a bit better. It's a bit more palatable than
2.5's fair. 2's weak.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 2.5 there's bits that are listenable.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't terrible, but not great either. And then I've got 15, 14, 13. I've got other end of the spectrum completely. The Endless River, which is their very last album, which again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's quite pleasant. It's not really my thing. It's ambient. It's again, would I listen to it? I wouldn't listen to it again. And it's almost like, I don't know. Is it necessary? Not really. To me, not particularly. But it's a tribute. I did read there's a tribute to Richard Wright, who passed away, and the other 2 members, notwithstanding Roger Waters, obviously, but the other 2 they had, I think, some stuff of his from back then, and they incorporated some of it into those tracks, which I kind of get. That's quite a nice thing to do, but it didn't really do a great deal for me. I listened to it and thought, yeah, that's quite nice, but beyond that, 2.5 stars again, maybe, probably. And then I've got 12 would be A Saucer Full of Secrets, which again, it's their second album. It's a bit of a second album syndrome, which is a bit of a thing. The way I'll try and do this quickly, but I listened to an interview with Roger Waters, I remember ages ago, and he's on about Sergeant Pepper's, and him listening to it for the first time, and it basically he listened to it. And he was blown away by it, and he said what it did do it told the rest of us, it showed everybody else that you can do anything you want. That's what he got from listening to Sergeant Pepper's. And it seems like to me, from Pipers at the Gates of Dawn, which was a Syd Barrett thing and quite rocky and psyche, then they did A Saucerful of Secrets. It was almost like they'd taken that mantra, like you can do anything, tried it, didn't work, in my opinion. It's sort of like it's nothing like the first album. And you can see they're trying something new, but they're just trying something. And there's some nice little bits in it. I mean, people seem to like Set Controls for the Heart of the Sun, but it just sounds like a 4-minute intro to me. I'm waiting for something to happen. It just sort of goes on. It's like the longest it's like an intro, and then nothing happens. I don't quite get that track either, but it doesn't. The album doesn't do. It looks like a muddled attempt at doing their own thing and doing something different, but very unconvincing and doesn't really work. And they're still finding their feet. I've put. And then I've got the More soundtrack. I think for 11. Is that the last one of the 5? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a soundtrack, which is a different dynamic because it's a film, so it's a narrower context, isn't it? Because I've obviously got to do so. They've got to, the film dictates, what they're doing and stuff. But saying that, there's a couple of tracks I really like on the More soundtrack. The Nile song, which I think's got a really good riff, and it's a really good rock track by them with some really sort of good guitar work on it. And Cymbeline, or Cymbeline, I don't quite pronounce it. But that's a Roger Waters track that really, if you listen to it, that does show that there's signs there that's a pretty promising track. That you can hear something things that happen later on are within that track. I think I've mentioned those 2 tracks. That's me, the first 5. Is that okay?
Right. Okay, Jeremy, what have you got?
Okay. As you said, the range of this band makes it incredibly confusing to listen to all 15 albums in one stretch.
Yeah.
From some of the greatest albums of all time to some of the worst things I've ever heard and hope to never hear again. Starting with number 15, which is 1987's A Momentary Lapse of Reason. I gave it 1 star. I noted that for the drum sound alone, this should be consigned to the dustbin of history. It just sounds awful. None of the song sticks. Gilmour plays some great guitar, but he can do that in his sleep. We need more. 14, I put The Division Bell from 1994. I gave it 2 stars. Production improved from Lapse of Reason. Some of the songs are decent. Marooned and Keep Talking felt like authentically grand Pink Floyd, like the grandeur we expect. And Gilmour seems to be trying some new things on his guitar on Marooned. Like I felt like he was pushing himself a little bit. So I gave that one 2 stars. 13, Adam Hart, Mother. 2 stars. I said it's impressive but pointless. I mean, and Ron Geeson or Geeson, I'm not sure. Geeson was the composer they worked with to assemble that large track. And he's no great modern composer. He's not Stockhausen or Boulez or Penderecki. You don't hear people talking about, let's bring back Ron Geeson to the concert hall. I don't want to insult anybody, but it's just not great. It's like classical mush. And they have 2 good songs on there. Summer 68 and Fat Old Son are pretty good. If I was making a mixtape, I'd probably put those on it. Then 12, I put The Final Cut. 2 stars for that one. It's more consistent than The Wall, but there's a lack of memorable songs. It doesn't have those songs that really nail you. I actually owned that record for a long time and I sold it. I remember before I sold it, I put it on. I was like, is this even music anymore? It's just Roger Waters, like ego and id and psyche and everything just put forth. It really should have been a solo album. I think it has very little of the sonic texture that we want from Pink Floyd. For 11, I have Ummagumma, 2 stars. Live material is good, but I have a ton of Pink Floyd bootlegs that are better than that from the similar period. And the solo stuff on those other 2 sides, the other is just bad. I mean, they really were noodling around. Nick Mason is the perfect drummer for Pink Floyd, but he should not be doing a sidelong drum solo or whatever that was. And there's one nice little folky thing that Roger Waters does, but it's just very little worth. So that's my 15 through 11.
Right, I'm looking at my notes here. We've got some of the same albums. It's a weird one. Gumma's my number 15. I think I love the live bits. Am I gonna, if I didn't count the live part of it, it would be zero point 0.5 stars. It's absolute garbage. There's nothing redeemable about it. Nothing. It's just literally them just noodling and jamming around, and it's just rubbish. It's not even jamming around. If it was, I'd quite enjoy it, but it's just awful. I don't ever want to hear that album again. I love the live stuff. I really, really love the live stuff. I think it's excellent. The live stuff's a number of stars, but if I look at the studio bit, it's terrible. So that's a zero point 0.5 for me. I'll give it maybe 1.5 if I include the 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 live stuff, but no. Number 14, Atom Heart Mother. I've given it 1 star. I think is it Atom Heart Mother and Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast. I've just written here utter dross. Some of the worst things I've heard in ages. If I don't know what it's about, hippie-ish, folky, doesn't mean anything. Summer 68's excellent. I really like it. I would definitely put that on a mix. And Fat Old Son's all right. I quite like
Yeah.
that. But the rest of it, I don't understand why I see some other shows go, oh, it's one of my favorite ever albums. I'm thinking, wow, wow. I respect their choices, but it's not for me. Don't like it. Number 13, I've got Momentary Lapse of Reason, 2 stars. Quite a jump, really. I really like Dogs of War. I think it's a great song. It's proper sort of Floyd type song about where mocks warmongers. One Slip's decent. I love on the Turning Away, the Mark Knopfler type guitar style he's gone for. I think that's the sound he was definitely trying to reach. And Knopfler and Gilmore are quite similar in terms of tone a little bit to a point. You can distinguish who they are, of course, but they're both great players. And I quite like New Machine. That was it. And I've given that 2 stars. It's not bad. I've just written disappointing. It's just a disappointing album, really. The Division Bell. Now then, 12. I've got more. 2.5 stars. Some nice tracks on it. I mean, I knew Cirrus Minor and Nile Song from Relics, so I was quite fans of those two actually. Up the Khyber just makes me laugh as a title because of the Carry On film, which I think was around about the same time, which I suspect is where they got the title from. Cymbeline is brilliant. I really like that. Reminds me of Crosby, Stills and Nash. Um, some of it's just rubbish though. I mean, Ibiza Bar, More Blues is terrible. Quicksilver, I've written filler. Spanish Piece, filler. 2.5 stars to quite like bits of it, but some of it's fair. Will I listen to it again? Maybes. But and then number 11, I've got the Division Bell. I've actually given this 3 stars. I quite like some of it. Love the first 3 tracks. Really, really good. Sound like Floyd has a good feel. Marooned is really good instrumental. I love the sort of instrumental stuff. Wearing the Inside Out, the background vocals do not work. It's not for me. Um, and I've written some other stuff. Take It Back, Bland. Coming Back to Life, boring. I like the Keep Talking thing with Stephen Hawkins. Lost for Words again. He tries to sound like Mark Knopfler, which is weird because he's Dave Gilmour and he's got a distinct guitar sound. And High Hopes, which comes back on the Endless River. Like it. So it's not bad. Some of it's really good. It's half a good album. So I've given it 3 stars. So that's my number 11. So we're down to the big 10 now then. Rod, what have you got at number 10?
What have I got on number 10? I've got the Division Bell at 10. Probably similar rating to you. I think 3 stars probably. It's a bit more traditional Floyd, I suppose. But again, a bit like Momentary Lapse of Reason, which I think comes next. But there's a couple of there's good songs on there, like On the Turning Away I quite like. It's a bit like the Straubs or Lindisfarne going a bit proggy sort of thing, it's like a folky a cappella start to it, hasn't it? And then it sort of builds. Quite a nice song. And what's the other song on there? I'm on like Momentary Lapse of Reason now, and that's on that album, isn't it? I beg your pardon. I'm getting them mixed up. I get those two mixed up.
Yeah, I can see why.
The tracks I like on I've written Marooned and High Hopes are probably the standouts.
Yeah.
The guitar work on Marooned is very Floyd-esque, and
Well, he won a Grammy for it, didn't he?
did he? It's got an achingly good guitar on it, to be fair, because he is a top-notch guitarist. So you can't that's not in dispute, is it? But I just think both of those two albums, and that leads me into A Momentary Lapse of Reason, which would be 10 and then 9. They're both probably 3 stars. I think I put A Momentary Lapse of Reason ahead of it. I appreciate the production, your comments earlier, Jeremy, but I think I like probably 3 songs stand out. So I put it ahead because I like 3 songs rather than 2 songs. So I quite like Learning to Fly, On the Turning Away, and Sorrow, I think, are all pretty strong tracks. But they're both, are they necessary? They're like Floyd going through the motions,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Which is fine, but Roger Waters isn't there. I don't know. Would I listen to them again? The odd track, maybe.
So is that your number 10?
10 was Division Bell. I'm on 10 and 9.
Yeah.
10 is Division Bell, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Did you do 9 there as well by any chance?
I blended it in. So
right, okay.
sorry.
Well, what
It's
we'll
because
do,
I got the tracks mixed.
we'll jump back when we come to 8 then, Rod.
Yeah, it's my fault. I got the tracks mixed.
That's easily done, easily done. Jeremy, what have you got in at number 10?
Number 10, I have The Endless River from 2014. I remember thinking it was kind of decent when it came out, and now 10 years later, I listened to it. I think it's very pretty. And one of the things that distinguishes it from the other latter day Floyd is that it has fewer of Polly Sampson's terrible lyrics, because a lot of it is instrumental. I mean, she's just a poor writer. She's just bad. The way she puts words together, I started reading some of the lyrics on those other albums. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I mean, it's just, I don't know how David Gilmour could sing them with a straight face. But so I like the instrumental textures. You can hear some of that Richard Wright. I always say he's their secret weapon. He would find these chords and these voicings.
Great player, isn't he?
It just make the most beautiful atmospheres. If I wanted to listen to something like that, though, I'd rather listen to the Gilmour album with The Orb. I don't know if you know that, Metallic Spheres.
I don't, and I will check it out.
Yeah, it's a really cool album. That's one I would put on more often than The Endless River. The weird thing about it, too, is that some of it feels more like Pink Floyd, but it also feels like Pink Floyd cosplay. They're sort of like they're going through the motions, as you say. So it's like a tough balance when you come back from a long career like that and make something new, because yes, we have our expectations. We want to hear what they do at their best, but somehow it came off as sounding a bit inauthentic. So yeah,
Right.
2.5 stars for The Endless River.
Right. Okay. 2.5.
Pretty good for a 2014 Pink Floyd album.
Did you say 2.5, Jeremy? Did you?
I said 2.5 stars. Yeah.
Right, well,
so
my
hopefully that really is the end of The Endless River.
My number 10
Pink
is
Floyd post Roger
3
Waters.
stars, and I've gone with Medal, which to me is 2 great tracks, and the rest's just absolute filler. In fact, some of it's terrible. I mean, One of These Days is magnificent. It's a really great song, absolutely fantastic. Love it. What a great opener. And then all the other tracks in between Echoes for me are just dirge, do nothing. Seamus is awful. It just doesn't do it for me. I'm afraid Pillow in the Winds is pastoral. It's all right. I can't get over Fearless with the whole Liverpool thing coming on. Not being a Liverpool fan, may I add. I don't get that. Yeah, I've just read Saint-Tropez and Seamus, not very good. Echoes, magnificent masterpiece, one of the best songs they've ever wrote. Love it, takes up a whole side. Absolutely brilliant. So it gets 3 stars because that's just sensational. Those 2 tracks are sensational. Have to be on any compilation if you're putting them, or a mix if you're putting a mix together. But the rest just doesn't do it, and it always mystifies me when I see people going, "Oh, it's the lost classic album." I don't see it, but horses for courses. We all have different tastes. So, Jeremy, what have you got down at number 9 then?
Number 9, The Wall from 1980. I give it 2.5 stars. Comfortably Numb is one of the greatest songs of all time by any band anywhere. It's absolutely exquisite. I could listen to that song all day long. Another Brick in the Wall is pretty cool. Putting the disco Pink Floyd, who thought that would work? Mother is a pretty cool song too. It's brilliantly tortured, I wrote, but so much of the rest of it is a complete and utter shambles. I think Bob Ezrin was just the wrong person for them to work with because he was so good on Lou Reed's Berlin with the strings and the horns and just building things up to this epic thing. They don't need that. They really only need the four guys to be the epic Floyd. And the movie, I loved the movie the first time I saw it. The second time I saw it with my girlfriend, I realized it was like misogynistic to the extreme, and I was like kind of cringing the whole time. But I used to own The Wall. I sold it. I think I got like $15 for it, so I was happy to get rid of it. I think it's just not good as a listening experience all the way through. Not good. I'll dial up Comfortably Numb on Spotify when I
Yeah.
need to get a hit of that. But yeah, 2.5 stars for The Wall.
Yeah, well, I thought I was the controversial one because my number 9 is The Wall as well. I've got The Wall in at number 9, and I've given it 3 stars. I've just written Pete Townsend did it much better with Tommy. It's basically a very similar story, much better. Tommy's much better. The whole going into yourself and blocking yourself out from society and all that sort of thing. And I just thought there's some really good songs that I like on it. Obviously, The Brick in the Wall is brilliant, but I don't understand the whole repetitive thing all the way through it. It just gets a bit much. Mother's great. Goodbye Blue Sky is great. I absolutely love that song. Young Lust, I really like. I think it's a terrific song. And then Hey You is fantastic. What else do I really like? I've written Comfortably Numb, overrated. Sorry, but I think it's overrated. I do. I think it's very good, but it's overrated. I just don't get the whole, oh, that's the greatest guitar solo. I think it's all
It
right.
hits me right here.
It is, yeah, it's all right. A Run Like Hell's great as well. But I mean, I'm the Flesh. Again, I don't understand what's the point of it being back on. I've just written pointless. I just think there's a lot of filler on this. This could have been a 5-star single album if they'd mixed in bits of his next album. I think it would have been sensational. Really, really up there with all the other classics, but just doesn't work. It's too much. I
Yeah,
keep listening. Oh God, this is terrible. Do I have to listen to this? And I thought that 40 years ago when I listened to it, and I thought, oh, it's too much. Then I was going, oh, listen, The Wall is brilliant. And I keep thinking, oh, yeah, it must be me. I don't get, why don't I get it? I'll try it again. No, I still don't get it. I'll try it again. No, it's still not working. So,
exactly. I mean, when I came around to selling it, I put it on I gave it one last chance. And then there's like that whole courtroom scene, maybe on side 4 or something.
The
I was like,
trial.
this is just absolutely awful. It's just terrible. I
yeah.
never want
So,
to hear that again in my life.
so I've given it three
And
stars
the
because
funny
there are
story
some
about The
great songs
Wall,
on it.
they had burned through all the money that they earned from the previous 3 albums, and they were coming to the point of being broke, and nobody had any ideas except for Roger Waters. And that was really the problem, is that the other 3 did not pull their weight. He wrote all the lyrics on a lot of the great records, but they all contributed musically. And then, of course, we know Richard Wright was
Yeah.
demoted to a session musician. They were paying him a weekly
Scandalous,
wage.
that, isn't it?
I mean, it's like the psychosocial part of that is just a mind blower that you could do something like someone to Richard Wright, who had been there since the very beginning. And but that was cutting their own nose to spite their face, because then he was just like, okay, tell me what you want to play. Tell me what you want me to play. I'm not going to spend my hours coming up with those voicings and atmospheres, So they lost all of that. Anyway, so that's the story of The
So,
Wall.
yeah. So there we go. The Wall, number 9. Sorry, folks. Rod, what have you got at number 8?
Yeah. I accidentally yeah. Number 8, I've got I've got The Piper at the Gates of Dawn at number 8.
Yeah.
I appreciate it's an important album because it's their debut album, so it introduces the world to Pink Floyd, doesn't it? It's Syd Barrett, the legend, the myth, and all the rest of it. They'd done 2 singles prior to that, though, hadn't they? So they'd done Arnold Lane and See Emily
Emily
Play. So
Plate.
they'd already
Brilliant
proven
songs.
that they
Brilliant
could
songs.
write. They could write what was still. It was still a singles era then, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So they could still. They'd already proven that they could write good, catchy, excellent songs. And then when they made the album, they actually moved away from that and thought, we're going to try and make an album, which is the album that we want to make. And there's some really good stuff on it. I mean, Interstellar Overdrive. It's
Brilliant.
like the first ever grunge riff, but 25 years earlier. I mean, I seen Pearl Jam headline Reading, I think, 2006, and they opened with Corduroy, which they quite often open with Corduroy off Vitalogy, and it's quite a very similar intro, guitar intro, Corduroy. I don't know if you know the song
Yeah.
Corduroy, Pearl Jam. But they started the set. It's a massive 2 hour plus set. They started it with Interstellar Overdrive,
Wow.
and
Right.
then went into Corduroy off the back of Interstellar Overdrive,
Huh.
and it was seamless because it's a
It's
grunge.
similar, yeah. So that's quite cool. That's a
That's
nice
cool.
tribute as well, isn't it?
You know, and he obviously it's a Eddie Vedder's like that. He loves the Who.
Well, the Who's his
He loves,
favorite band,
he
isn't
loves
it?
early punk bands.
Yeah.
He loves the Doors, and that's just it shows he appreciates where those riffs come from, I suppose.
Yeah.
But then there's Lucifer Sam, which sounds like a sort of the bass line is like a James Bond spy thriller kind of bass line. It's just really, really catchy. I love that song. And then I love Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk.
Yeah.
The 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 percussion sort of it was kind of percussion, but it's really, really kind of strangely structured track. And you got this do 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 kind of a chorus, but it's not. It's just a really bizarrely structured song, but really memorable. And I think there are really memorable moments on that album.
Yeah.
Um, and then Sid Barrett, what happened? The second album he was only involved in one track, I think. So
Yeah.
they changed after that. So they only really made that one psych rock album, but it was extremely influential. And there's really good stuff on it that I like quite a lot, but it's still a bit patchy and quirky and very much of its time.
Mm.
So I don't listen to it often.
Yeah. Along with Peter Green, he's probably the other great casualty of that era, isn't he? In terms of the whole drugs thing, which is a real
Yeah,
shame. A real shame.
yeah, drugs and fame and
Yeah.
all of the above really. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's sad because he was a very talented guy, clearly, but
Really,
it
yeah.
is a standalone, piece of art. It's
Yeah.
nothing like the rest of their
No,
catalog. The
absolutely
second
not. I
album,
totally concur.
and that's because he was there still. Then it's very much a Sid Barrett driven album, I think, isn't
Yeah,
it? And
absolutely.
then Roger Waters took over, and he became, Sid Barrett Mark II, didn't they? I suppose. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Jeremy, what have you got at number 8?
Number 8, I have More, the soundtrack to the film More, which is from 1969. I give it 3 stars. I think they were figuring out a way to make soundtracks. They hadn't quite hit on it to make a soundtrack that you'd want to listen to outside of the movie. I've never seen the movie, but like you both said, there's a lot of filler on there. The instrumental tracks just feel like sketches. They don't really go anywhere. But then they have some songs where you're like, something new is happening. The Nile song, you can feel a new sense of
Yeah.
purpose. They're coming together. They're forging ahead and finding something between the four of them that they've been looking for since Sid Barrett left. And Cymbeline is just an absolutely fantastic song. I have so many bootleg versions of that from those days when they were still playing those songs. And it's just magnificent every single time. It's such a great song. So I gave it 3 stars. It's not a great listen all the way through. It won't make you take it off,
Yeah.
but like whole tracks will go by and you'll be like, wait, what did I hear music? I don't think anything happened. So yeah, so that's number 8.
That's a good way of summarizing it, actually. Yeah, my number 8 is the same as Rod. I've got Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I've given it 3.5 stars. Half star for its importance, I think. 3 stars really, but I've given the extra half for the importance because it's got the first elements of prog on it as well, hasn't it? With Interstellar Overdrive, I think, which I love. I think it's great. The Astronomer Domine is just a superb opener. I absolutely love that. I mean, I love Scarecrow. I love Bike. I love the Bike. I think it's a great song. And again, it's just daft, easy, psychedelic pop, just superb. So it's that
bit
mashup.
XTC-ish.
Very,
Mhm.
very. That's probably why then. And it fits in with that sort of psychedelic pop that they do so well. I think they did so well. Would be interesting what they would have done had Sid sort of been all right, I think is the phrase I would use. But yeah, I'm giving it 3.5 stars. Rob's summarized everything I really want to say with regards to it there. So there we have it. Rod, what have we got at number 7?
Yeah, 7. I've got yeah, they flip-flopped around a bit. I've actually got the final cut at 7. It was nearly 6, but yeah, that's an album that because it's a slightly later album. I'm not really massively. I think
Yeah.
not post-Wall. I haven't listened to loads of it because I thought I've lost interest, I suppose. And it's the only post-Wall album that I liked, genuinely liked. I listened to it more. I went back to it more. There's
Mm,
tracks on it. It's like the Wall, but it's more sort of cohesive and succinct.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not as bloated.
yep.
It's got those little talking bits. There's a story to it. It's very bombastic, obviously, but and it is very much like a Roger Waters solo album because
Yeah. I think we're all going to say that, aren't we?
there's not many. It's just very Watersy, and there's not a lot of guitar work. There's some really nice guitar work on some of the up-tempo ones, like "Not Now, John." I think it's got a good guitar
Hmm.
Yeah.
break and a couple
Yeah,
of
it's
other
probably the
tracks
best
out.
song on there.
That's one of the really good songs I like, actually, "Not Now, John." But it's really quite. What I like about it is it's quite cynical, well, extremely cynical, very anti-establishment, and really, really scathing about pretty much everybody, every leader on the planet, every system on the planet, and obviously it's anti-war, which everybody is.
Mhm.
Everyone's anti-war, aren't they? So in a way, you have to get behind the sentiment because no one likes kids getting. It's actually out now, isn't it? No one likes children getting
Sad.
killed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a line at the end of one of the songs about children not being killed. Can't remember which track it is, but it might be the
Mm.
last one actually. But I think it works pretty well. And I agree with Jeremy in the sense that, like, it hasn't got as many memorable tracks as The Wall, has it? Because it hasn't. They haven't got the same hooks. They haven't got the same commercial appeal as the Comfortably Numb's and Another Brick in the Wall. But in terms of the actual thing as a whole, I think it works pretty
Mhm.
well.
Yep.
Um, and I think I'd go as far as to buy a copy. I think I might buy a copy of Discogs on vinyl just to listen to it, see what it is, see what it sounds like on vinyl with headphones. Only because I've never listened
Sorry,
to it.
I don't have my copy anymore. I'd send it to
All
you.
right, I've never listened to. Yeah, I've never listened to that album. I quite like it, and I think I'd like to listen to it on vinyl. So I might buy a copy. So that was a bit of a surprise for me.
Hmm.
Interesting. Good choice, I have to say. Jeremy, what have you got at number 7?
Number 7, I have album 2, A Saucer Full of Secrets from 1968. I gave it 3.5 stars. I find it to be a continuation in many ways of the sound world of Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It doesn't quite have the songs there, and Sid Barrett is obviously, not at full strength. I think he only wrote one song and appears on maybe two songs.
Yeah.
But I just like listening to it. It's a good listen. I think Set the Controls does everything that I expect from an early Pink Floyd epic. Was it better live? Often it was better live, sure, but they were had figured out how to like bring that wild, light show psychedelia into the studio. It's great. And this time around listening to it, I love that song Seesaw. It's just so pretty. It's beautiful. And that's I love when an album that you've listened to for a long time, but not in a while, and it just surprises you with the song. So I was like, darn, that's a great early Pink Floyd song. So yeah, number 7, Sauce Full of Secrets, 3.5 stars.
Well, my number 7 is A Saucer Full of Secrets, and I've given it 3.5 stars. And I've written side one is perfect. I
Hmm.
think side one is absolutely 5-star material all day long. I think it's brilliant. Let There Be More Light is great. Gilmore's first ever guitar solo. Remember a Day. I love the bass line on it.
Mm.
Sid's on slide. Norman Smith on drums, which was a surprise to me when I did my research. I was walking the dog, and I've listened to it years ago, and I haven't listened to it for a while, and I love this. This is an album I'm going to go back to certainly side one. I'm going to go back to on a regular basis. And I thought the drumming's great. That's really quite expansive. And I checked, and it wasn't him. It was no, it was Norman Smith.
The producer, right?
Set the Controls for the Heart of Sun. I disagree. I think it's magnificent. I really love it.
Absolutely.
All five play on it. I think it's the only song all five of them ever played on together in terms of a recording, like a
Yeah.
studio song. And I love Corporal Clegg. It's quirky, But of course, it's Waters' first attempt in writing about World War II as well. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
that, but it's actually done in a sort of in a different manner, in a different style. I think it's lovely, really well put together, really catchy. It's got a bit of a Kinks feel to it as well in parts. So side one to me is brilliant. Side two is a real letdown. I thought
Mm-hmm.
Saucer Full of Secrets is a terrible song. It's like a bit of a mishmash and it's nothing. I don't get it. Seesaw's all right. Jug Band Blues, I've just written unnecessary.
Yes.
That Sid's song, it didn't need to be on. It's garbage. Don't bother putting it on. It weakens the album actually.
Yeah.
So which is a real shame because as I say, side one is superb. I absolutely love side one. I was I was quite excited. And I hadn't listened to it for I say 30 years. And I was but I will be listening to side one on a regular basis again. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rod, what have you got at number six?
Number six, I've got The Wall. Um, it's a bit of a toss-up between, because the final cut and The Wall are quite similar in the sense
Yeah.
that one's like a kind of, like I say, a more succinct version. But I think The Wall just trumped it just because of the strength of the songs that are good. And I appreciate it's bloated. There's miles too long. There's loads of filler. The trial's awful. There's a track called The Trial. It's just, like Jeremy mentioned earlier, it's just, why? Not really, but it's just, but at the same time, you've got Hey You, the way the guitar builds in that
Great song,
song
that
and the
like.
lyrics, the whole build of the song per se is
I
just
love the bass line on it. It's fantastic.
yeah, absolutely fantastic. Mother's a great song, really emotional,
Mhm.
heartfelt, track that is. Another Brick in the Wall and Comfortably Numb. Not what more can be said about those, that they're institutions, the pair of them. I know you
Yeah.
think Comfortably Numb's overrated, or you mentioned it. I would be more in Jeremy's camp, and
No, that's fair enough.
particularly,
That's what it's all
some
about, isn't
songs,
it?
they're a bit like Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division. There's songs, and Comfortably Numb falls in that bracket, that have been played to death and overplayed in probably in every nation on earth, but it doesn't make them bad. They're overplayed because they're fantastic songs. And the live version, the Pulse one, for example, from '94, if you watch that on YouTube, talking about the guitar solo, because he obviously elaborates on the guitar.
Mm.
So it's just some of the most, it is one of the best guitar solos of all
I
time.
saw him at the Albert Hall do it, and he did a great solo. I was there. I was about
Yeah,
8 rows from the front. It was brilliant. Phil
yeah.
Manzanera on is the other guitarist, which was bizarre. Brilliant.
One thing I forgot to mention when when I was talking about The Wall is I actually have a bootleg from Nassau Coliseum because they did tour The Wall, not very much, but they did some touring, and it's way better live
Yeah.
because it's literally just the four of them, I think, with maybe Snowy White on extra
Snowy White.
guitar.
Yeah.
And it sounds more like Pink Floyd, and they cut out all the theatrical stuff, like the music theater stuff that I just
Yeah,
can't
and
stand.
some of the strong songs, like we say, are very strong. And I
Yeah,
haven't mentioned Nobody's
I
Home.
forgot about that though, but I'm going to go back and listen to that bootleg to remind me of how good it could have been.
Nobody Home is another good acoustic, sort of slow tempo. I think Nobody Home is a good song as well. So I think there's enough good stuff on it to probably trump the final cut, which is why they were flip flopping a little bit. But yeah, The Wall at 6 for me.
We've
I
all
haven't given
got
any
as well.
stars, but I'll give the stars at the end. Sid, is that all right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just tell us how many stars was it?
Well, The Wall will be 3.5. I think I put.
Uh, I mean, I think we've all got our own version of the wall, haven't we? We've all do little shortened versions like you put on your headphones, and it sounds like a great album. Then everyone's got one. It's yeah. So that just tells you a lot, I think.
They're like a dwarf garden wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy, what have you got at number six?
Number six, I have what I think may be the great hidden gem in the Pink Floyd catalog, which is Obscured by Clouds, the soundtrack to La Vallée by Barbet Schroeder. This was their second soundtrack. And at this point, they knew what they were doing. This is from 1972. I gave it 3.5 stars. Childhood's End, There's Gold, and What's the Deal, or however they want you to say it. I mean, those are just great, great songs. And the whole thing is just very memorable. Even the instrumental stuff works. There's some great guitar in there, good vocals. They sound like a tight, focused band who know what they want and are just heading straight towards the dark side of the moon because that was the next album.
Yeah.
I really think that I was saying to my wife, if you feel like I really want to listen to some good Pink Floyd, but I'm kind of tired of those ones we've all listened to. Put on Obscured by Clouds. It is really, really good. So that's my number six, 3.5 stars. Just great.
Yep, my number six is Obscured by Clouds, and I've given it 3.5 stars as well. And I've written Obscured by Clouds, great instrumental song, love it. I love the groove on When You're In. Burning Bridges, like Mudman, it's got a similar sort of link, hasn't it? Um, the goal it's in sounds like Bad Company to me.
Yeah.
It's really
It's a
weird,
great
isn't
like
it?
70s rock song. It's
It's like
just
Yeah.
it's like 2 years before Bad Company,
I
but it sounds
know.
like Bad Company. I was genuinely quite taken aback when I heard it. I haven't listened to this album for years. Um, really like the album, really like it. There's some not quite as great, but
Yeah.
Childhood's End's pretty good. Free Fall's good. Stay, very good song I've
Mhm.
written here. So it's a really good, solid album. I think it's a very
Yeah.
good album, actually. I do. And it's a one that will be played quite regularly by me,
Mhm.
just but like a chill out sort of album. It's a really good album. Really underrated, actually. Yeah. It never gets
One thing
mentioned.
I remember also is the song. Yeah, there's a little bit of playfulness on this one, which is not something we ever got from Pink Floyd after this point.
Yeah.
They were just not very lighthearted people,
No.
but they could be playful and it worked on that album anyway.
But yeah, no, I really like it. So 3.5 stars for me. Terrific album, actually. Really good. Really good. Rod, where you got number five?
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I concur with everything you've just said because I've got it at five, Obscured by Clouds,
Yeah.
because it's definitely an underrated album by theirs. I think it suffers from being in between Metal and Dark Side of the Moon.
Mm.
Therefore, it just gets forgotten about a little bit. Medals. I know you less so. Not everyone likes it, but it is highly rated by them in
Yeah,
their
it is.
canon. And Dark Side of the Moon is Dark Side of the Moon, and that is 72, smack bang in the middle. But like Jeremy said, if you listen to it, it sounds like a sort of there's Dark Side of the Moon moments on it without question. There is, the song. It's sonically, it sounds fantastic. But there's some transitions, the way the guitars transition. I think it's in Mudmen. It's
Yeah.
just awesome. It just sounds great. And Childhood Ends is a beautiful song, I think. Is it Childhood? Yeah, Childhood's End is, isn't it? Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great song. And so is What's the Deal? And then it is quite funny the Gold track because it is just a. Have they ever done a straightforward rock track like
It's a
ever?
straight, it's a song
They've
that's
got
really good, but
they've
doesn't seem to sit on the album,
they've
does it?
got 15
Right.
albums. They've got 15 albums, and they've only got
I
one rock
know.
track with a
Yeah.
genuine rock riff and like a rocky vocal.
Yeah.
But it's decent.
But
Yeah.
they
It
could
is.
do it.
It is decent, and I just think, although that's a soundtrack, and obviously we said before the more thing, you are restricted with a soundtrack. I
Yeah.
assume just because by definition it's a soundtrack, isn't it? So it's for the film The Valley, so you haven't got free reign, have you?
Yeah.
And to do as good a job as they did, I think it's really cohesive and, like I say, sonically and production wise, it sounds fantastic. And it'd be an album of theirs I'd play and go back to on a regular basis
Yeah.
without,
I absolutely get
and
it.
there'd be
Totally
quite a
agree
few
with you.
tracks. If I had a playlist, there'd be quite a few tracks off that album that'd be on it,
Yeah.
without question. I'd give it 3.5 stars as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all in the same area, same ballpark there. Like, Jeremy, what have you got at number five?
Number five, I have Metal. I give it 4.5 stars. I think it's a really great album. And what a huge leap from everything that came before it. It was like all of a sudden somebody like slapped them and said, be as good as we know you can be. And they just right from the very beginning, one of these days, like you said, it's just mind-blowing. It's so focused and so good. And I actually love the folky songs on here. One of Pillow of Winds, Fearless. The chorus thing at the end does kind of take you out a little bit. And there is a chorus thing at the end of Obscured by Clouds too, which is a little
I
odd.
think it's the football thing here, you know.
Yeah, and I get that, that you'll never walk alone. I know that's something
It's a
that
Liverpool thing, yeah.
chant
Yeah.
at the football games,
Us
but
both are not Liverpool fans, but there you
and
go.
I think that was part, one of the things Roger Waters said was this album and Echoes specifically was the beginning of empathy for them. What is empathy? Empathy is recognizing that other people have feelings and trying to connect to that. And they really felt like they had been disconnected all those other albums. They were just in their own world. And maybe having the football chant, the football thing is kind of like bringing all these people in
Mm.
to the album. So I look at it that way. Do I love to hear it? Not so much. Saint Tropez, once again, it's a playful song that actually works for me. I like it. Seamus is just, please. If I could take it off the record, I would take it off
It's
the
written
record.
about Steve Marriott's dog, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to be a dog lover. I'm
Yeah,
not a
Steve
dog
Marriott's
lover.
dog, apparently.
Who
Just like,
cares?
why did you
Well, it
have to
was
have
called Seamus, I
the
believe.
it makes my heart sink every time I hear it. Just like, ah, you just ruined what could have been a perfect album. Echoes is obviously just work
Brilliant.
of sheer genius.
It is.
Unlike Adam Hart Mother, I think Echoes should be played in concert halls around the world. I think that new music ensembles could really make some meat out of that and do
Yeah.
something cool. It's very well constructed. There's an architecture there. There's a lot of sonic stuff going on, beautiful singing, beautiful melodies, lyrics. It's just an absolute masterpiece. I mean, if I mean, I could agree with you and say yes. If both sides, I can't say that both sides are as good as Echoes, then it would have been a five-star album. But I
Yeah.
think it's very, very close. And just the absolute leap between Adam Hart Mother and Metal. I mean, it's just one of the great thrills of rock music, hearing them make that leap. And even I was reading up some of the stuff they talked about on those intervening years, and when they talked about Adam Hart Mother, one of them said it was rubbish. The other one said they were just poking about in the dark. In this one though, they have fully come into their own. I just think it's a great, great album. So 4.5 stars. It's one of the albums their reputation is built on.
Well, mine is, yeah. My number five is The Final Cut.
Hmm.
It's, as we all agree, it's a Roger Waters solo album, isn't it? With the help of some members of Pink Floyd. I mean, you mentioned he's attacking world leaders at the time: Thatcher, Brezhnev, Reagan. I think I can concur with all of that. It's just like a Thatcher and the Falklands Wars, very clear. It's very angry, very. I think there's some great songs on this. What really strikes me is how on a couple of tracks, I think there's one on the wall as well, actually, how he's clearly influenced, Roger Waters, clearly influenced by John Lennon in terms of his vocal delivery on a
Hmm.
couple of tracks. So I'm just looking at my notes here. Where is it? Yeah, The Gunner's Dream, the Rupert Brooke poem, inspired by the Rupert Brooke poem, The Soldier. Very John Lennon feel to it. You can sort of hear it, that sort of echo and the sort of track, the way he's tracked it. But I've written possibly the best song on the album. I love the way the word dream blends into the saxophone. I think that's really clever. I really like that. It's a very clever technique that he's thrown in. I mean, there's some good songs on this, really good songs. Um, the Hero's Return should have been on the wall. And it's clear. It really should have been on the wall. It sort of fits in really well. Not Now, John is magnificent. Very, very good song. Somebody slaughtered it. Rachel Mann and the Qantas described Not Now's John as fun, but musically crass and obvious. Further saying this is Surrey blues rock as vapid as the views it seeks to satirize. And I don't agree. I think it's a great song. I totally do not agree. I think it's a very, very good album. Again, it might grow more. It's definitely gone up my list because I hadn't listened to this for ages and I never liked it before. And I'm really, really starting to like this now. I've given it 3.5 stars, but it could certainly go up in the next few months or so. The more I listen, because it's an album I'm really, really starting to like. I can see why.
Yeah.
So, Rod, we've got number four.
Yeah. Number four, I've got Medal, um, which is, yeah, I mean, Echoes is magnificent. It's a whole side. It's like Jeremy said, they tried it on Atom Heart Mother and doing long songs. They're great at long songs, as we'll talk about later on as well. But they did absolutely nailed it with Echoes. The difference between Atom Heart Mother and Metal is just inconceivable almost, isn't it? It's just so focused and well constructed, isn't it? It's like a suite of just gorgeous sections which all work
Yeah.
sort of kind of individually and collectively. It's just one of the best prog rock kind of tracks or suites or whatever you want to call it of all time, without question. And it's a shame that the first side has got a couple of iffy tracks on it. Like you were saying, if you had, say, Childhood's End and something else on instead of, say you took Saint Tropez and Seamus off and put Childhood's End and I don't know something else on that's
Yeah.
quite, a better. It'd be a 5-star album probably, not a 4-star album.
Mhm.
But despite that, it's still, because of echoes, and I like One of These Days. It's a fantastic intro to an album. Just drive, it's tight,
Yeah.
focused, just they'd found their feet where they've been sort of fumbling around a little bit and stuff, and it just sounded very focused straight off the bat, didn't it? And then I like Fearless, apart from the Liverpool, notwithstanding the Liverpool chant. If you could edit that out, it'd be a
It'd be
couple of
better.
notches better. I think. I like the acoustic kind of riff
Yeah.
and the time signature of that track. Pillow of Wind is just, I think it's a really attractive, pleasant sounding thing. Quite pastoral, but in a just sort of high end way, I think. But yeah, Seamus, why? I don't know. And Saint Tropez, yeah, playful, but quite not very Floydy because they become more cynical as they get older, don't they? Is that maybe an age thing? But like Obscured by Clouds, and then this has got some lighter moments on it. It's not sort of dark or incredibly cynical necessarily. It's quite it's quite an upbeat sort of pleasant
Yeah.
sounding thing.
They're coming into their own, but without all the money and fame yet. So
Yeah, that's right. They hadn't
maybe that
sort
had
of yet
something to do with it.
exploded into the stratosphere at that point. They were just really talented guys that had finally got a lot of things right, and that was a start of greatness, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you
Um,
think Eno took the third Uncle bass line from One of These Days?
oh, did he?
I
Well,
don't
there you
know.
go.
They sound kind of similar, those beginnings, dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, I suppose the bass line does, and he just put those sort of early indie jagged guitars over that jagged guitar sort of riff
Yeah.
over the top, didn't he? I think Bauerhouse covered that as well, didn't
Hmm.
they? Third Uncle, yeah. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, that's my number four's medal. Yeah,
And four
great.
stars. Jeremy, what have you got number four?
All right, so I'm going to preface this by saying the top four albums for me are all 5 stars.
Right.
And the order of them is just kind of like your mood. Tomorrow it could be a different order.
Yeah.
But they are all 5-star albums, among the best albums ever made in rock and roll and music in general, I would say. So my number four this day is Dark Side of the Moon. It's just an absolute masterpiece from start to finish. I think the only thing that holds it back from me picking it higher this year or this day is that it doesn't have quite the seamless quality of some of the later albums after they hit their stride with Dark Side of the Moon. There's sort of these different things going on, but it really picks up on the metal experiments. And when you think about they were making those helicopter sounds with the synthesizer and the explosion and everything, it just sounds fantastic. It's kind of like seeing a movie with a lot of special effects, and you're like, wow, those still hold up.
Was that Alan Parsons doing a lot of that?
Alan Parsons, he was their engineer on this album. So yeah, it could be. I mean, they don't give people much credit. They say that the three of them were doing the VCS3 synthesizer, everyone except for Nick Mason. They also mention tape effects. Nick Mason and Roger Waters both doing tape effects. Alan Parsons is just listed as engineer, so we'll never really know. But they did bring some more people in, though. The backing vocalists are fantastic.
Amazing.
Claire Torrey, obviously, just an incredible singer.
Yeah.
Doris Troy, who had a huge hit
The old
with
soul
Justin.
singer.
Yeah, just they picked their singers very, very well. And Dick Parry is a great sax player. That's a new texture that they brought in, just kind of adds a different flavor. And one of the things that's so great too is that they put Money on there. That's like the single, and that really probably helped them sell records, but it sort of doesn't quite fit with the mood because it is just more of a rock song, although it's not really that straightforward because it's got the 7/4 time signature throughout most of it, which is like that little hitch in your step, and then it goes into the 4/4 to like drive it home. So good. But side one is just the whole thing is like a movie. It just builds, it ebbs, it flows. And one of the things that's interesting about them is we have used the word prog when referring to them. One of the things that they have that most of the other prog bands do not is a great sense of space.
Yeah,
They don't need
loads.
to fill every corner with a lot of, technically virtuosic playing. I think part of that is that they were finding their strengths in their weaknesses, because Nick Mason and Roger Waters are not necessarily virtuosos at their
Yeah,
instrument. Roger Waters is great at coming up with those simple bass lines and that just drive right into you. Gilmour is a virtuoso, Richard Wright is a virtuoso. Nick Mason, as we heard, don't play drum solos. But for somebody who can like build tension with just like the perfect fills or just kind of move into another section, there's nobody better. And I still remember putting on this album when I finally bought it for myself, like 1978, 79. And I was like, nobody ever heard a rock album produced like this before. It's produced so crisply and cleanly. I can only imagine how it must have felt for Nick Mason to hear his drums, just that absolute perfection of recording. It's so great. I absolutely love it. And yeah, I mean, it's also one of the great packages, the cover, the
oh,
poster, the stickers.
magic
There's
in it.
two posters in there. I feel lucky that, I bought it new and like I said, like 78, 79. They were still putting all that stuff in there. So thank you to Harvest EMI for, continuing to give value for money, because I still have all those elements. I'd never put the poster up, never put the stickers on anything. So everything's in beautiful condition and it's just a great experience. We listened to it yesterday, and I was getting a lot of chills, and everybody was just lost in it. What a great, great album. And one of the cool things that they started doing around that time is they would workshop the album on stage
Yes.
for months. And I think that's really why those three albums that they made in the 70s, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and Animals, why they're so good is because they played them to death and workshopped them and figured them out. Then they went into the studio and put the like technical perfection on everything. So it's really cool when you listen to those live concerts where they're starting to find their way to bits and pieces of those albums. What an amazing, amazing
Yeah.
experience.
Nobody can complain about Dark Side of the Moon. I'm just surprised it's four. But right, well, my number four, this is where I'm going to get a lot of abuse off people and get a bit of grief already. Although having had the wall at number nine, I've probably already been switched off. My number my number four is Endless River. I absolutely love it. I love ambient music. I think it's just perfect. It's a great chill album. There are lots. It's a real homage to their previous albums. I mean, I'm looking at some of my notes here. There's for example, I've written here late night or Sunday morning album, but I've written here it's what we do. Clearly links to Welcome to the Machines. It's almost the same chords. It's got that same lovely groove, and you can hear Gilmour put his guitar licks over the top of it. I can barely remember the name here. Is it Anacina? Sounds like something off Dark Side of the Moon, like Us and Them. Again, it's like a little homage to that song. Alonzi, I've written, could have been on the wall. So you've got these little guitar textures and passages that link and echo back to previous little albums. Pardon the pun about echo there, but there's lots within it. But it also is up to date. There's loads of space. And it's beautiful. I think it's a really beautiful tribute. It doesn't have any lyrics on, barely any, and I think, but it does. It's Stephen Hawkins, and which is a bit different, and it works. And I just think it's fabulously constructed. I actually preferred the normal version to the deluxe version. I thought the deluxe went on too long, and weirdly, so I thought it's a beautiful album. I am going to listen to this album probably at least once a week, once a fortnight, just when I want to chill out. Maybe even go to sleep on the couch, and it's just a lovely sort of album. What a groove! The guitar playing's brilliant on it. The space is great on it, and it goes like a river. It just flows gently and is beautifully, beautifully put together. So yeah, 4 stars for me. Could go up higher, could go up higher. The Endless River. I've written excellent album, and it could be higher. So there we go. There's the controversial number 4 for me. So Rod, what have you got at number 3?
Yeah, number 3, I've got Animals at number 3. Quite tight, really. The top 3. The top 3.
Top 3. Toss them up in the air.
Yeah, I mean they're all like Jeremy mentioned. They're all 5-star albums. They're all just
I think we're all into 5-star territory now.
yeah, and all 3 of them are 3 of the greatest rock albums of all time. I would say. All 3
agreed.
And well, Jeremy had Dark Side at 4, but that's certainly in the greatest as well. But Animals, it's funny because it came out in '77, which is the same year that Nevermind the Bollocks came out, and the Clash's debut, for example.
Yeah.
And I was busy listening to them then because I was pogoing down the front, probably, and protesting at Thatcher in a very obvious White Riot style. Yeah. And if you listen to Animals, it's like the most sophisticated and polite protest album of all time. Because it's just as punky.
Oh, lyrics are
the lyrics,
they're epic,
the attitude of it, the power and the drive and the attitude of it, the cynicism of it, the anti-establishment, the pigs and the dogs and the sheep, the sort of twist on Animal Farm, but
it's an allegorical sort of references, isn't it?
But again, it goes on to the final cut. Really, it's world leaders who just basically control everything, and then high flyers who just enable everything, and then everybody else, and they're the tracks, and it's bookended by 2 really beautiful acoustic bookends, isn't it? Then you've got 3 animals in the middle. And unlike Dark Side of the Moon, they've gone back to having a 17-minute track, for example, which is almost echoes. And Dark Side didn't have any long. I think the longest track on Dark Side is probably 7 minutes. So they had all that success without having one of those epically long songs. They've gone back to 5 songs on an album in '77, it's just out of time to have an album with 5 tracks on it.
And bear in mind, 2 of them are really, really short, which bookend the album.
Yeah, they bookend the album. So then you've got a set. I think it's something like a 17-minute track, a 12-minute track, and an 11-minute track in the middle of punk.
Yeah.
Where if you're 2.5 minutes, you got your head kicked in.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. But when you listen to it now, you realise how good it is. The lyrics are fantastic,
magnificent.
The song structures. The transitions, even Dogs, for example, it's got guitars, it's got a really sort of laid back keyboard bit as well, hasn't it? And then it goes back to guitars.
Yeah.
And then within that, you've got a fantastic lead guitar solo, which is just awesome. And kind of aggressive. And
I think it's his best guitar album.
Yes, it's just, and it doesn't sound like their other stuff either. So within the Floyd canon, it stands alone as a sound. The soundscapes are completely different, but equally fantastic.
Yeah,
as the other great albums of theirs. And I didn't really appreciate it until I was a little bit older, like beyond my teenage years and into my 20s and 30s. And then you realise, hang on a sec, that came out the same year as, like I say, those 2 albums. And I love those 2 albums as well. Don't get me wrong. And, I always have, and because they're part of me and quite important albums to me. And Animals wasn't then, but it is now.
The lyrics to Dogs are as shocking as Bodies is by the Pistols to me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, old people just going and dying of cancer. And
when I first heard that, what the hell's that?
It's pretty dark. Stabbing people in the back. No, you can't trust anyone on earth.
All about the old school type. It's very British, so I don't know how it translates over to Jeremy. But it's very British. The whole dodgy handshakes, the jobs thing, the whole
I'm surprised
system.
in terms of context and the negativity of it, I'm surprised it sold more than 4 copies in the US.
Yeah, because it is very British, isn't it? It is British almost.
You're far too optimistic to appreciate.
Yeah. It's because if this had been like the Kinks, you'd have sort of understood with that sort of English Britishness to it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's not. It's Floyd, and it's very yeah. I totally agree.
Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. But anyway, yeah, all that. But in spades on this album, anyway. But, yeah, it's fantastic. It's 5 stars. There's a fag paper between the top three.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And Animals is 3. Yeah, just.
Jeremy, what have you got at 3?
Well, I guess I'm the only real Sid Barrett fan in this crowd because I
You
have
got Piper at the Gates.
Piper,
Piper at
yeah.
the Gates of Dawn is number 3. Granted, the copy I bought in high school, which is the copy I listened to the most, I do have the anniversary box set on CD. But my taste of this album, my love of this album was forged by the American version, which is slightly different in that it starts with See Emily Play, and it doesn't have some of those. It doesn't have Astronomy Domine on it.
All right, okay. Wow, that's a big loss.
So, and it doesn't have Bike on it either. Those were singles in America or something. It's like one of those weird, but I like those songs too. I just think Sid Barrett was an incredible musician, incredible artist. And this is the purest expression of his genius. I like his solo albums too, that they helped him make in the early 70s. They have some really, really great stuff on them. Some very sad stuff, as you can hear him fumbling around. But you could hear he had a gift for melody. He had a gift for musical architecture. They were all following his lead. And it's also cool to think about the fact that this was recorded at Abbey Road at the exact same time the Beatles were making Sgt. Pepper's. So there's a kind of a cross contamination between the two of them, I think. And I have gone on record, and I will say it again, this is the greatest psychedelic album of all time. It's the only one that I think stem to stern delivers on the promise of psychedelic music that's supposed to represent what those psychedelic drugs could do to your world and your reality in music. So I just think it's absolutely incredible. It's a gem of the 60s. It's a gem of all time. I give it 5 stars, and it's my number 3 Pink Floyd album.
Yeah, well,
Barrett, may he rest in peace.
Yeah, that's a great cover, by the way. I'm torn here, I'll be honest. I am with all 3 of you, really. I think the first 3 I could have just thrown up. So my number 3 was number 1 until last night. So that's how close I'm just so
exactly.
They're all joint number 1, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I've only chosen this number 3 for today because I was in a different mood when I was driving the car and just going over it. So I've got it number 3 because of the claustrophobia of the album, and that's Animals. Because it's very claustrophobic, I find, because of the intensity of it all. It's not one of those albums you're going to go, I'm going to chill out and listen to a bit of Animals. Because it's not that sort of animal. It's not that album, is it? You want that album, go and listen to Wish You Were Here, but it's not that album. It's a different animal, pardon the pun. And it is magnificent, as you rightly said. Rod said virtually everything I want to comment. I mean, Dogs, I've got here. It's like a Weller type of lyric about capitalism. You know, you've got all that which he did years later with Smithers Jones and stuff and all that sort of thing. Or Mr. Clean, it's that sort of thing. So you've got all those lyrics there, and you talk about the cancer line, which was a real shocker to me. Pigs, which is about capitalism again and businessmen, and references to Margaret Thatcher and Mary Whitehouse, and his attack on them as well. Bear in mind, Thatcher wasn't prime minister at the time. Sheep. Clever again, and the link with regards to well, we all know the story with regards to the way that it goes, and everyone just follows. But he's flipped Animal Farm on its head, where the pigs don't win at the end, does he? And it's the sheep sort of overcome. So it's sort of an optimistic ending, which is odd, but you've really got to listen out for it on the album, and it's emphasized very cleverly if you listen. But with Dave Gilmour's guitar at the end, and he does this happy high bit on the arm, and he's going up and down the neck, and it's really quite jovial, bizarrely. So it's an incredible album. I think I posted online recently that it's arguably the most punk rock album of 1977. Which it sounds mad. but lyrically it absolutely is, and until, as I say, till yesterday it was my number one, and it literally just depends on how you feel on any given moment, and it's very claustrophobic. I think it's Dave Gilmour's best guitar playing in terms of his lyric, his musicality. I think he's very like Brian May. Obviously, the tone's totally different, but they're both very musical guitarists. They don't twiddle around like Jeff Beck, and they can do amazing technical things. I'm sure they can, but they tend to do the more like melodic sort of things. And you know who they are straight away with this beautiful melody. And he's very much a melody guitarist, and he's a brilliant guitar player. So yeah, that's my number three. But as we said, could be any of them. Literally could be any of them. So, right, Rod, what have you got at number two?
Yeah, number two. These again, it's a close call, and they've been flip flopping all week really. I've come down with Dark Side of the Moon at number two, and I think it's just because it just sounds a bit more 70s and a little bit, yeah, just a bit more 70s than Wish You Were Here. In terms of, which is not a bad thing. It just sounds a little bit more dated, maybe as an album. And I think, I think Jeremy mentioned, there's a couple of tracks. Like Money's a great track, but it's a little bit out of kilter, maybe from the rest of the album. It's sort of standalone track, great track. Well, a brilliant guitar solo.
Yeah, great solo.
As well as the riff's great as well, isn't it? But yeah, and I just think. It's one of the greatest albums of all time, just because of the production value, the way it's just every song's worthy and top class, and the lyrics are very good, sort of timeless, universal themes. The transitions are fantastic as well. They really, it's the first time they really obviously nailed it.
Yeah.
You had Medal, didn't you? Obscured by Clouds, were starting to show those signs on certain tracks, but they just really absolutely were plugged in and, top of the game, weren't they, on this particular album? And like you say, they brought vocalists in to do those backing vocals that just sort of come in and add an extra.
Remarkable.
Well, obviously, the Great Gig in the Sky is the most famous one for those vocals, but they come in on other tracks as well, don't they? And, but just at the right time and just at the right level. I think Jeremy mentioned earlier that just the production value is just absolutely awesome. It's difficult to say too much about it because everything's been said about it.
Yeah.
It's great. It's an iconic cover. I've still got the posters as well.
Yeah, Storm Thorgerson, isn't it? With the cover.
I haven't used mine. Mine is still in pretty good nick, I think. And just everything about it is top class. And it's just, it cemented them as one of the best and most important bands of all time.
What I will say about the top three as well, or our top three, obviously Jeremy's is slightly different. They're albums you can't really dip into. I think you have to go from start to finish.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? You can't go, I'm just going to play that. Money might be the exception, actually. But you can't really dip in and think, I'm going to just play that one track, because you're thinking, well, that's so out of kilter because it doesn't work. You're not going to just suddenly put Time on, are you? For no reason. It's like, wow.
And I think this is the first time you realise how good they were at, like you say, long intros.
Yeah.
And space and patience. Nothing's rushed.
Yeah.
Everything's done, and sometimes it's at a glacial pace, but it's immaculately glacial. And then a drum will come in, or a guitar will just transition in. And it's the first time that anyone had done that to that level of excellence, I think. And no one does it as good as them, I don't think.
No.
In terms of the effect that and the construction of a song, highs, lows, builds, spaces, they're they're world class, at all those things. And it'll just be, it will just last forever, that album, won't it?
Yeah. No, nobody can argue with Dark Side at number 2, 1, or wherever.
Well, yeah, wherever it lands, but yeah.
But yeah, no,
5-star album.
magnificent. Jeremy, what have you got at number two?
Number two, I have 1975, Wish You Were Here, 5 stars once again. The fact that they were able to follow up Dark Side of the Moon with anything nearly as good is astonishing. But they went and they just pulled themselves out of a creative flatline. They had few ideas, and but they just kept working at it. And then when Roger Waters figured out that it could be a tribute to Syd Barrett in many ways, that was kind of the hook he needed. And also, we do start to see some of that anger and cynicism come through. Welcome to the Machine, Have a Cigar. They had been, at this point, they were seen as the cash cow, and that's not a very pleasant way to be looked at. The music business back then was even more rapacious than it is now, and I'm sure that the record label was pestering them for the 2 years it took them to make this album. But once again, they toured a lot of it. So they would be out, they would play Dark Side of the Moon all the way through, and then they start playing bits and pieces of Wish You Were Here. And a lot of times they'd end up the set with echoes or something like that. But they road tested a lot of this stuff and just started coming up with these bits and pieces and making them into coherent suites. Shine On You Crazy Diamond, they split it, but that works in the context of the
Yeah.
album. It'd be interesting to actually sequence it so you heard, parts 1 through 9 all in a row. I've never tried that,
No, I haven't
but
either.
it's really a great way they introduce it with Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and then they cut it with Welcome to the Machine.
But they've done the
And once
same as the
again,
previous album where they've done a circular structure. And in fact, they do
yeah,
it on Animals as well, don't they? So there's a
that's
circular
true.
structure
That's
on all
true.
three albums.
Yeah. And once again, the machine sound effects, which are all produced by
Brilliant.
synthesizers, just absolutely perfect. It just works, and it just puts you in that headspace of being in a factory and just being turned into meat. And obviously, a lot of the lyrics are great. Once again, Roger Waters wrote all the lyrics. Say what you want about him. When he was on, he was on, and we do sometimes like to joke about the one line where he said we're like two lost souls in a fishbowl. It's okay, it's a little mawkish, but on the whole, just perfect. And then they get Roy Harper in to sing Have a Cigar because Waters said he could have done it if he had a little more time, but they needed to get it done, and Harper just nailed it from the start. From the
Yeah.
start. Yeah. So, and like I said, I still connect to that experience I had lying on the couch with my headphones on, just with that absolutely gorgeous beginning, and you don't know where it's going to go. It's just those notes, ding, 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 ding. And then once again, Nick Mason,
Yeah.
nobody can tension like him. Just what a great record. Obviously, fantastic package. I love how they have the water spilling out on the inner sleeve, and then on the outer sleeve they have the sand spilling out. Just those details are just absolutely wonderful. I still have the hype sticker too, which is super
All
cool.
right. Yes.
So that's my number two. Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd, 1975, 5 stars.
Brilliant. My number two is Dark Side of the Moon. We've said everything really. It just is remarkable. I mean, all the songs are just superb. The way it's structured, the way each song flows is just incredible. Like from Breathe. I think On the Run is fantastic. I absolutely love that. I love the keyboard effect. I think it's just superb. Love all that sort of thing. Claire Torrey's voice is just moving, really great. Guy. Can I just do a little anecdote about time? When I used to go to a pub, when I used to live up in Newcastle when I was a kid, me and my mates would put time on in the pub to see people jump when the sort of all the bells would go off, Then we pint of beer flying up in the air. It's I don't know, you might remember this, Rod. There used to be a TV show, Pipkins.
Yeah, I do remember
And they used to
Pipkins.
go, it's time. And I used to remember that as well. That they also had that sort of Pink Floyd feel to it in a weird sort of way. And you used to have all the clocks going off at some point, and then it was obviously borrowed, I think, from Dark Side. It's just brilliant. I think the sax is a huge step forward. Us and them, and that beautiful sort of sort of laid back languid sax that just comes in.
Yeah.
It just moves, it floats, but it's so the articulation of the notes is beautiful. It is a perfect album, and also dealing with mental health, of course. And you could argue it links back to Sid again, and all of those other issues that it's very ahead of its time. They've got all these little guys reading cards or
Yeah.
having a conversation where they took little bits of them
Yeah.
and then they just sort of, if you
I've
like,
always been
they
mad.
sampled them. We're ahead of sampling times era. They sampled these different guys and put sampled effects and put them in. It is way ahead of its time. It's a remarkable album. It sounds fresh. There are certain albums that sound fresh still. For Your Pleasure, Roxy Music's another one. Still sounds modern. Still sounds like the future. And this album certainly does for me. It still sounds modern and fresh. I think it's a remarkable album, and we've all said all of these could be number one quite comfortably.
Yeah,
So
and think about it, it's all razor and
no.
tape back then,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
fact
very
that it's
clever,
so
isn't it?
seamless, you
And
can't hear anything. There's no mistakes. There's nothing fudged out. It's
no,
all
and,
perfect.
it's all just comes down to the mood that you're in now, not like other albums where you go, no, that's definitely my number one. Because I can't say that, and I think Rod said the same as well. We can't say that because it's just how you feel at the time. So yeah, that's my number two. So Rod, what's your number one then? It'll be the same as mine.
Surprise, surprise, yeah. The only one left to Wish You Were Here for
Yeah,
me. And it just edges it because I think they both sound timeless, but I still think Wish You Were Here sounds a little bit more contemporary still and a little bit less 70s. Just the production generally, I think it sounds just a bit more modern and a bit more, it's more, and because of the Sid Barrett connection,
yeah,
it's a little bit more emotional. I'm not saying Dark Side Moon isn't emotional, it's got those soulful backing vocals and stuff, but I still think emotional, it's a bit more viscerally emotional, I think. Wish You Were Here. Shine On You Crazy Diamonds, arguably one of the best opening tracks. I mean, there's not many opening tracks that are 17 minutes long, is there, to be honest? But as an opener, but like Jeremy said, those four notes, when they come in, dun, 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 and then and just the build, it's perfection. You'd struggle to get a 17-minute song written by anybody before or ever again that's as perfect as 1 to 5. 6 to 9 is great as well because it's obviously an extension of that. But and when his vocals come in, the lyrics are just, I just love the bit when he goes, you legend, just
Yeah.
it's a tribute to their friend who just lost himself and everything, and there's added emotion there, I think, because of that.
I think it's the cohesion of it all as well, and it is a slow
Oh,
build. Whereas
very
other bands
slow.
who did long songs like that, so for example, Genesis did Supper's Ready, which I think is magnificent, by the way.
It is, yeah.
But that's about 10 different parts. And
Yeah.
it's not one beautifully lit, build up, Kishan. It's like goes do, 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 do,
And
do.
we alluded several times to space,
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
patience, and glacial sort of paces
And it's
almost.
beautiful.
Shine On You Crazy Diamond is literally the definition of that. You shouldn't, a song you think, well, it can't be that fantastic. It's too slow. It just takes too long to
Yeah.
get there. But it doesn't matter because it's just sort of perfection. The pace of it and the transitions and everything about it is just absolutely spot on in every single way. And then in contrast, there's only 5 songs on it anyway, same as Animals, funnily enough. And then at the same time, you've got that, and then the other bookended long song, and then they've got one of the best 3 or 4 minute songs ever written in Wish You Were Here on the same album.
Oh yeah.
It's like two ends of Pink Floyd. You've got like possibly Echoes, maybe, but I'd still have a Shine On ahead of it. So you've got their best ever long song and their best ever short song on the same album, and they're very different, but they still go together on the same album, and it's just like a perfect little 3 minute, 4 minute song, isn't it? And Have a Cigar is great as well. Fantastic guitar break in Have a Cigar's got fantastic guitar break in it as well. Really kind
And the
of.
line, by the way, which one's pink is one of the greatest
Yeah.
lines
Oh
in
yeah.
any
By the way,
album,
which
isn't
one?
it?
Yeah. By the way, which one's pink? That's going back to their cynical best, doesn't it? About the fact, like you said, became a cash cow by then, and it was
Yeah.
just, that they wanted to do their own thing, and they weren't allowed. It's like we're not in it for the money. Whether it's Radiohead or Pink Floyd, certain artists, they're not in it for the money. They're in it because they want to make the music they want to make, and if it makes money, fantastic. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that sort of pure, I suppose, ethos. They've got, their music. They're doing it purely for the music. That they're
Yeah.
not. It's not they're not interested in money. I mean, it's a bonus, isn't it? But it's not. They're not driven by that. And
Yeah, and they
that's
weren't driven by fame either. They didn't.
no or fame, and
They
that
didn't put
song's
their,
all about that, isn't it? Like
yeah,
guys
they
saying,
didn't
"Oh,
put their
this
face on a
album,
record
make this much
after
money."
Amalgama.
Yeah,
I think the
yeah,
space is the big thing, though, in it on this album. More than any of the others, there's more space on this album.
more
Yeah,
space on this
And
album.
I think because I'm going to jump in here and do my number one with you because it's the same album.
Yeah, yeah,
And I wrote down Welcome to the Machines is really dystopian. And it's definitely got that sort of feel with regards to it, that sort of dystopian sort of future almost. I love the vocal effect on it. I think it's very, very clever. And Dave Gilmour apparently sang with him and sped his voice up a little bit because he couldn't hit a
mm,
note. But you can tell him, but it works really well, adds a shimmer to it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Cigar was Gilmore and Waters both tried to sing it, didn't they? And much to their chagrin, Roy Harper could sing it perfectly well, and so they sort of gritted teeth had to let him sort of do it, and they were never happy about it, were they? But it's a remarkable album. I think the sadness with Sid and with him coming in to view them and meet them in the studio when they were
yeah.
recording
He
it
showed
is.
up.
I think
yeah,
that adds to the whole thing and it adds more to it. And that empathy that Rod was saying really does sort of, pardon the pun, shine
Pathos.
through it
Yeah,
as well. But also, I didn't know that they were asked him to play on it. I didn't know that. I was reading about it and they asked him to play on it. He didn't understand. He'd gone. He was
no, he
gone.
had
He was
completely
gone.
lost touch with music.
It's so sad,
He
isn't it?
was
He
a
was just
painter at that
gone.
point. But yeah,
But it is from start to finish a work of sheer brilliance. It really is. The artwork is sensational. That weird cover on the front. No idea why. I think they used to go around loads of different bands, didn't they, offering them all the same album sleeve. I remember watching Genesis saying, "Oh, we were offered that," and Led Zeppelin got it for presents, and various other things. So they were all offered various sleeves, and they just kept trying to hawk them because it makes no sense. Whereas Animals makes absolute sense.
yeah,
But I suppose you could argue it's the machine and the system and the cynicism with handshakes and fire. I suppose you
yeah.
could link it that way as well.
They're
Um,
signing the deal that's going to
yeah, so you could
burn
argue, I
everyone.
suppose, but we're sort of maybe
Hollow
clutching,
Man offering the record deal.
clutching at straws, maybe. I don't know.
You
But
think
yeah,
you'd think now they'd use AI or Photoshop to do that
yeah,
from now, wouldn't they?
yeah. Oh yeah, you
Rather than
certainly
send
wouldn't have some
someone,
guy being set on
they
fire and
just
have
set
somebody
some
do a
guy on
beat.
fire,
Yeah,
Not
put on the fire suit and
and
pray.
roll him up in a carpet afterwards.
like the good old 70s. He
There's a
was
great
beamed and scalded
documentary
for
on.
his role. But
There's a great
no,
documentary
Rod,
on
concur
hypnosis.
100%
Was
with
a
you.
stuntman, wasn't he? Yeah,
Sorry?
stuntman. He was a stuntman, wasn't
Stunt man, yeah. Yeah.
But did you see the documentary on
Yeah.
hypnosis?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very,
he?
very
Yeah,
cool.
they mentioned
Brilliant.
good documentary that.
Brilliant. Very, very good. So yeah, Rod and I, we both concur. So Jeremy, your number one is
Animals, number one, it is as scabrous as the Clash and the Sex Pistols and as bleak as Joy Division. I mean, it really gives you that same sense of just kind of hollowed out rage at all the, terrible things going on in the world. And believe it or not, we have a few of those going on right now here in my country. So yes, you don't need to be British to love Animals. I remember when I first got it, I was just astonished. And when you talk about seamlessness, they really just assembled those long tracks with such care. And but there's a sort of a marvelous simplicity to it. They don't over egg it. It's just, and they do these little effects like when the voice blends into the synthesizer
yeah.
talking about. Like other people have tried that, but nobody did it before Pink Floyd. And also, once again, Roger Waters with the lyrics, ha ha, charade you are. And this also sounds a little bit like, shawadi wadi, you know what I mean? So it's like this, it's melodic, but he's making a point at the same time. And yeah, Gilmour, if you give something like this is like Gilmour's like a dog with a bone. He just every guitar solo is so fiery. He really takes it to another level of, he was very good at those languid melodic things, but in this one, he's just it's almost like he's spitting with rage on some of those. It's like he's like he can't even get out a phrase because he's just so caught up in the emotion of the album. It's just, it's like you said, it's punk, it's post-punk, it's prog, it's art rock. I just think it's the pinnacle of Pink Floyd, and we all know what happened next. They made the wall, and that took a couple of years. And I would also say, having listened to a lot of bootlegs, they're one of the least well represented live bands as far as their catalog. I mean, they put out Pulse, and then they put out Dark Side of the Moon with a rather disappointing Wembley concert. I have way better Dark Side of
Well,
the
there's
Moon
lots of
concerts.
stuff that they've brought out in the UK now with regards to 70, 71. There's quite a lot of stuff that's
Oh
come up
yeah,
69,
but
70, 71, but
the
there's
the
nothing of the classic era.
1977 tour for Pink
Yep,
Floyd is absolutely a staggering
yep,
tour. They came out, they would play the entirety of Animals, the entirety of Wish You Were Here, and then they might throw in a couple of Dark Side tracks and Careful with That Axe, Eugene. I
yep,
mean, and that's just one concert. And sometimes the vocals get a little wobbly. I know that's their kind of Achilles heel,
mm,
doing live vocals, but most of the time they're totally fine. And I remember there's one version of Animals where they're doing Animals and Gilmour is playing the solo and he hits this note and I swear to God he holds it for a minute and it's just like the tension and then he just goes into the next phrase. And I mean, I still remember this one time I was playing the bootleg in my country house and the whole family was there and we're all eating dinner and that part comes on, everybody just stops for a second. It was like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. And of course, it was hilarious because my niece pipes up and goes, "I don't like Pink Floyd."
I
But it
hate
was,
Pink Floyd.
It's
So
always
go
what.
back
but
to
I
the
was like, you know what?
beginning.
That's but it like just the fact that here we were like 20 years after this concert, listening to a bootleg recording, and David Gilmour just silenced everybody. He really is an incredible musician. I think Animals is the last album where they were all firing on all cylinders, the four of them working together to
Yep,
make something coherent, cohesive, that sounded great, that had emotional content, musical innovation, all the things you wanted from a Pink Floyd album. And man, I just absolutely love it. Yeah,
yep.
I mean,
Never the
Wish
same
You Were
again
Here
afterwards.
and Dark Side of the Moon, they're all just as good, but
Yeah.
but
Oh, yep.
we need
So,
to get into that cynical rage. I love
so
it.
there we go, folks. We started off with I hate Pink Floyd, but we all love Pink Floyd, is the honest answer. So leave us your lists. Some of our choices were quite controversial, so it'll be interesting to see what you say. Please be kind. Please like and subscribe. We really need to knock up our subscribers list, please. And the more likes we get, the higher we go on the algorithm. So thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel. And until the next time, from Rod, Jeremy, and myself, take care, look after yourself, and goodbye.
Cheers.